Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Make an Atari 2600 Game. In this episode, everything falls apart, literally. I do have some more development footage to share though. So this house of dominoes started teetering over the edge when my retro television inexplicably died. The screen went white. So I thought I'd take it apart and look at it, and well, I took it apart and there were parts lying there and it still didn't work, so anyway, I threw it out. Anyway, so the Atari, 3 decades its senior, is still working fine, of course. So no problem, I thought I'll just get another one at the thrift shop. But 3 thrift shop purchases later and none of the televisions can sync to the Atari, or they just don't work anyway, so it's kind of a pointless endeavor. So I was planning on modifying my US Ataris to use composite and S-video anyway because I can't display them on my Australian televisions. So I thought I might as well just do that now. So the first up was my Sears Video Arcade 2. This modification was a little bit messy, but I figured I'd get it to work anyway. It's an Atari, it's pretty robust. But after drilling holes in the otherwise immaculate case, it dawned on me it's probably not a great idea to permanently alter an Atari chassis. Because, composite, especially S-video, are already being phased out. And soon you'll need something else like HDMI or DisplayPort. But it's too late, the holes are drilled. It's permanently drilled for composite and S-video now, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that was my first mistake. And this was the second. I plugged in that weird Sears Video Arcade power supply, the one that delivers AC power to the Atari instead of DC. It's just anyway. So I plugged that straight in to this killer. Australia's got this 240 volt power, so it just destroyed the power supply, not surprisingly. I was able to find a replacement. I have this Atari disk drive power supply, and it sort of works. It delivers AC power, but it doesn't quite have the current that the Sears Video Arcade wants. So it was kind of difficult finding I couldn't find a match that was better than that. So some games work. But most of them don't. They're probably because they require more, I don't know, do they require more current to play the game? I don't know why, but like iMagic games seem to work and some Activision games seem to work, but most things just don't work. And it's probably because the power supply isn't quite up to snuff. I read you can use Super Nintendo power supplies for this, but I don't have one. So undeterred, using my newly found appreciation for not destroying Atari cases, I decided to modify my US Atari 7800 next. So this went much smoother than the Sears. I didn't drill any holes in it. I just threaded the composite and S-video wires through the RF opening out the back. And it works, and it has a great picture. But the Harmony cartridge doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work on the Sears Video Arcade, and it doesn't work on the 7800. It doesn't even work connected to the PC anymore, so it's completely stuffed. It's dead. So that was the last straw. Because I'm unable to test the game on real hardware, I can't get my own physical cartridges anyway, and there's kind of I feel like there's a general disinterest in the DPC kernel that I'm using to make the game in Atari Basic, so I've just called it off. Sort of. So I've been talking with another Atari enthusiast, and he's designing this new cartridge. And it's kind of like the Rolls-Royce of cartridges. It has a few extra chips to help the Atari, a few coprocessors. And it uses this technique called bus stuffing that it halves the amount of instructions that the Atari CPU has to handle, because you just stuff the data onto the bus and you skip the whole command that tells the Atari to load it there because you've already stuffed it there. That's sort of how it works. So it frees up some CPU cycles you can use for other things, and that allows you to make higher resolution graphics and more colors, probably better sound. But don't get too excited. It's still an Atari 2600 with all its quirkiness and weird limitations. So originally, I wanted Under the Castle to be a first-person dungeon crawling game, sort of like Wizardry, or if you're thinking of the Atari more contemporarily, would be the is that a word? Anyway, the contemporary to the Atari would be the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Treasure of Tarman game for the Intellivision. And but what I wanted to do was I wanted to animate the wall movement, and the way I was thinking to do that was like Phantasy Star does on the Sega Master System. So it fakes the movement, but it does it really well. And I can't think of another game around that era. None of them faked it like the Phantasy Star did. And I think it makes it a lot more fun. So what I thought I would do was, you know how I animated the playfield in Under the Castle, the current version of it, when you transition to another room, it animates the whole room moving. I thought I'd just animate a first-person view. But he had a better idea. And this is where I kind of feel like I'm out of my depth a bit, but he ported a Raycasting Engine to the Atari 2600. And if you're not familiar with a Raycasting Engine, that's what id Software, I don't know how you pronounce that. That's what they use for Wolfenstein 3D. It uses a Raycasting Engine. And the benefit of that is you don't have to fake anything. So this is what the engine looks like currently. Here I'm standing in front of some green exterior walls, and I made a blue room inside to see how it sort of transitions between colors. You can rotate around and the view scales appropriately. So there's no texture mapping, but I'm pretty impressed with how this looks. So if you sacrifice a different colored walls and sort of have a monochrome wall instead, you can get a solid looking walls instead of how you see how it looks sort of like a Venetian blinds. That's done so you can get a different color on each column. I might be able to add more detail with sprites or with the missiles or the ball or something like that. I haven't looked at any of that. All I've been doing is running around in this test environment, sort of trying to see what's possible. One interesting thing is you go to like this weird Valhalla if you run off the map because there's no collision detection. You end up in this like golden weird spot. So yeah, it gets a bit weird when you run off the boundaries of the array. So that's where I am now. Depending on how I'm able to wrangle this Raycasting Engine, I might redesign Under the Castle to be first-person dungeon crawler like I originally envisioned it and just assumed it wasn't possible. Or I might just port the game as is to this cartridge architecture. At least then I'll be able to manufacture my own cartridges, boxes and instructions. I can do it all myself. I don't have to rely on anyone else. And not to mention all the extra power you get from bus stuffing and, more chips. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll leave you with some footage I captured from my modified 7800. I've never had a 7800 before, but there are some good ones, like Galaga's pretty decent port. Miss Pac-Man's okay. And then there's Desert Falcon. It's like Zaxxon, sort of, but I have this, it's weirdly compelling. I can't explain it. It's basically Zaxxon with a falcon that shoots things, but it's, I don't know, I like his animations, I like how he sort of like waddles through the water. I don't know why I like it, but I like it. But Atari, they were just porting arcade ports. There's nothing with a lot of depth on this platform. There's only like 50 games for the Atari 7800. One of the cool things about the 7800 was that the homebrew community recently, I don't know how recently, maybe in the last few years, broke the encryption on the console so they can make homebrew 7800 games. The only problem with that is that not many people have a 7800 and they're kind of expensive compared to the 2600. Thanks for watching.